We're ready. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the 6th Sustainable Development Transformation Forum, organized by the United Nations Office for Sustainable Development in Incheon, Korea, and the Asia-Europe Foundation based in Singapore. The topic for today is the circular economy, moving to zero waste. A big question. And I think at this point, we need to think about what this really means. Before I introduce the speakers, I'd just like to make a few small comments myself, but I'm not going to be long because we don't have long, since the formal closing ceremony is at the end of this session. But one of the things that I think we need to think about is the circular economy simply the latest fad? Is it just the latest big idea that everybody thinks is a good one and talks about for a long time, and then it goes away? Is it realistic to think about an economy where there is virtually zero waste, and the waste is dealt with in a way that is non-harmful to the planet? Is this reasonable? Is it reasonable at the planetary level? Is it reasonable at the regional level, national level, local level? And if it is feasible, what does that mean? How do we do that? How do we make it happen? Is it already happening? I think some of our speakers this morning have actual experience of working with the zero waste economy, the circular economy, and circular industry. It will be enlightening to listen to what they have to say, but I think we should bear in mind all the time how much of this is transferable to a permanent situation of sustainability, because that's really where we have to go. We won't reach a sustainable planet unless we can implement the circular economy. So if it is just a fad, we have a real problem. I'd like you to think about that as we listen to our presentations. I would remind people on the chat line and the participants that you can pose questions through the chat line. We will see them and we will pass them on to the panelists, who can also see them and choose themselves if they wish to pick up on a question coming from participants. Now, I'm going to introduce our 4 speakers for this morning. Professor Seong-Hui Lee is from the Kyunghee University in the Republic of Korea. He is an expert in waste management and has written quite extensively on the subject. He will, I hope, give us an overview of the way waste is impacting our planet and what measures are being taken to attempt to redeem the situation. David McGinty is the Global Director of the Platform for Accelerating Circular Economy, PACE, from the World Resources Institute. He is an expert on the global management of waste and the circular economy, as his title suggests, and we're hoping that he will give us a global overview of the situation. Regina Pawłowska, Senior Project Manager at the Asia-Europe Foundation, or ASF, which is also the partner of UNOSD. That's a lot of initials, I know, of the United Nations Office for Sustainable Development in organizing this forum. She will be talking about, I believe, the circular economy and the use of the use of single-use plastic. And finally, but certainly not least, Miss Jen Fraser, who was from the Synergy Foundation based in Victoria, British Columbia, Canada. And she will be showing us what can be done and what is being done on the local level. So with that introduction, and I hope you're not too fazed by what I said to begin with, I would like to hand the floor to Professor Reed. Thank you, Professor Reed. Oh, and I forgot, sorry, one last thing. I forgot to mention my co-convener, David O'Connor, who will be the rapporteur for this session, at the end of which there will be the closing ceremony. And I look forward to that. And now I hand over really to Professor Reed. Apologies for that. Professor Reed, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Session Chair Comjoy. And I'm so happy to make a presentation in here. Also, I'd like to special thanks to Mr. Park, Chong-Gyu Park, for invite me in this session. And today, I'd like to mention about the sustainable practice of waste management toward the circular economy, the case study in Korea. Basically, Korea is a poor country for natural resources and energy. We imported a lot of materials from outside, almost more than 90%. So circular economy is crucial point. It's essential in Korea. Next, please. So I'd like to mention the introduction and concept of circular economy and waste management in Korea and sustainable practice. Practice is very important. A lot of countries make the plan. So using the action plan is to make the practice is more important. I like to emphasize on that. And finally, I like to make the summary. Next, please. So total cost of import in Korea is more than 500 billion US dollars. 52% of that is imported raw materials. And more than 40% is imported energy. So more than 90% was come to the outside of Korea. As increased also developing the industry, the generation amount of waste in Korea is increased from 346 million ton a day in 2007 to more than 400,000 ton a day in 2018. For those period, the annual growth rate is 2.3%. So that is the reason the circular economy is very important globally and domestically. Also, the SDG, Sustainable Development Goal, is important in Korea. Those background in Korea, the framework on resources circulation was enforced to promote recycling in 2017. Municipal solid waste, including packaging waste and plastic waste, have been managed through resources circulation. For the circular economy society, sustainable practice based on 3 Rs are key issues in the field of waste management. Next one, please. So this is concept of circular economy, as you know. So it's from it's 1990s. That is in the waste. The concept is the cradle to grave. It was changed cradle to cradle. As you see, this is the raw materials. It's called design for production and distribution, consumption, and collection, recycling. This is the loop, circle loop. That is concept of circular economy. The necessity and methodology and benefit. I think that everybody understands that. But problem is every step got some kind of obstacles. In the design, there is bottlenecks there, and production, they think the design and distribution, every step got the problem. So it should be solved there. That is, next one please. 7 key elements for the circular economy to solve those bottlenecks. So this is the 7 key elements from design to the joint value. So some part, they got these key elements is applied. It depends on the country situation, its economic situation, technical situation, also social situation. And so these key elements, they apply to solve the bottleneck or obstacles in circular economy. Next one, please. Also, circular economy with a sustainable development goal in waste management. Among 17 SDGs, 6 SDGs is related to waste management. The most important thing is number 12, responsible consumption and production. That is, reducing consumption by better design or material selection. Also, reduction of virgin materials used by reuse and recycling. This is main part because this one is the effect to climate actions, reduction greenhouse gases emissions by resources circulation and prevention on waste generation. Next one, please. So in Korea, waste management is started 1986. That is, the 1986, we have the Waste Control Act. It starts here. So only this Waste Control Act is applied to waste management systems. 1991 is recycling term was added in this act. 1992, another act on the promotion of saving and recycling of resources. It starts here. So that is promote the recycling. 2004, the act on promotion of purchase of green products. From the recycling, they got the recycled product. But there is no market to sell. So this in 2004, they make the act on the purchasing of green product. Also 2003, and construction waste recycling promotion. Because in beginning of 2000, we will rebuild the house. So there is a lot of construction waste and demolition waste. So we need this kind of act. 2007, Act on Resources Circulation of Electrical and Electronic Equipment and Vehicles. That is e-waste and ELV is applied 2003. 2007 is applied. I already mentioned 2017. All kind of waste can be recycling under Framework Act on Resources Circulation. This one is for sustainable practice of waste under this Framework Act. Next one, please. So recirculation. Resources circulation is based on 3 R's: reduce, reuse, recycle. We have the several regulation and policy. For reduce, there are restrictions on the single-use goods, restriction on the overpacking. Also, waste charge systems is applied some items. The important one is volume-based waste fee systems. That is for reduce of waste generation. This is nationwide, the regulation. It's starting 1995. It's almost 25 years, more than 25 years, apply this one. So, using this kind of system, the waste generation is 2.3 kilogram per day capita, going to reduce to 1.0 kilogram per day capita nowadays. So it's huge and strong regulation to reduce the waste generation by volume-based waste fee systems. For reuse, beverage container deposit system, we use that. For recycling, we use the EPR system, as you know, to apply to 16 items, including metal cans, glass bottle, and paper pack, and synthesis resin, and fluorescent lamp, something like that. Also, we use the Eco Assurance system. Eco Assurance system is EPR plus RoHS. So it's applied to all kind of e-waste. Right now we have the 50 items and for e-waste, but they collect all kind of e-waste from household. And the other one is end-of-life vehicles applied to Eco Assurance system. For recycling, the government support the recycling facilities, also fostering recycling industry. Next one, please. Another one is strategies on plastic-free society in household waste. As you know, the plastic waste is the big issue in the world right now. So we have the 3 policy and regulation on reduction of single-use plastic products. Right now, it's 47% of single-use plastic. It's reduced to 38% until 2025. Also, no production and no use single-use plastic product in government and public institutes from this year. And prohibition of double packing. We make the packing already, and double packing is prohibited from this year. Second policy is expansion of recycling of plastic waste. Mandatory use recycled plastic is 30% to produce the plastic again, and 2030. Until 2030, we must use recycled plastic more than 30%. Also ban on import plastic waste and promote consumption domestic recycled product. Right now, we apply the PET, PE, polyethylene, polypropylene, polystyrene. And 2022, next year, all type of plastic is applied. Third one is strengthen management of marine debris and microplastics. And this is starting this year and next year. The other strategy is technology and transition to alternative plastic society. Replaced with 100% of bioplastic by 2050. Until 2050, we develop new alternative materials instead of plastic. So that is one is the bioplastic produced from 100% biomaterials. Also develop the recycling technology for bioplastics by 2050. The third one is implementation support and establishment of database on material flow of plastic by major industry from this year, and planning and promotion of R&D, plastic-free society. Next one, please. Sustainable practice is real practice of waste for circular economy. It's not plan. It's action. Action is very important, and this on production and use. That is manufacturing or industry work. And generation, discharge, and collection. Those parts we call the segregation. And segregation is very important. You must discharge correctly, separately, and collect. So collection is also important. A lot of money is spent for collection. So those are segregation is very important. I like to emphasize to developing countries. That is very important. So I already mentioned about the volume-based waste fee system. It's applied to municipal solid waste. Also, it's applied to food waste using standard bag or RFID. So those volume-based waste system is decrease the waste generation. Also, separate discharge of 6 types of municipal solid waste in Korea. It's by the law. It's glass, ferrous, plastic, paper, textile, expanded polystyrene, styrofoam. Also, it's the collect separately for specific waste, battery, fluorescent lamp, and PPE waste related to COVID-19 using collection box. Also, we apply to e-waste using take-back collection system and door-to-door collection system. And then apply to recycling and produce the raw materials. And operation from public waste treatment facility is operated by local government, specifically for food waste recycling facility. We have the more than 100 facilities for food waste. Also, nationwide, we have the e-waste recycling facility. That is 13 recycling facility in Korea. That is operated by producer responsibility organization. Another one is operate the local authorities. So PRO using the recycling facility for e-waste, the 13 facilities in Korea. Next one, please. So I already mentioned about the collection of recycling waste, six items. Also collection of food waste, volume-based waste fee system using RFID is starting 2010. This is the collection containers. And if you use RFID card, attach this part. That is identification, who you are. That is address on there. So next one, please. So first one is you get the food waste discharge management card. This you can get the card from the office, and then when you discharge of food waste, you attach the card, and then this machine identified your address, and then open the lid. So you throw away the food waste on here, and then automatically they measure the amount on here. And then close the lid, and then those information is going to central server. It's operated by environmental corporation. From those information, they got the levy the disposal fee by the household. So those are RFID system for food waste in Korea. Next one, please. Another one is e-waste collection. E-waste collection is operated by PRO or producer directly. Another one is collection by local government. And consumer dispose the e-waste. In that case, is the take-back system. When you buy the new product and they take the old product, it's free. They go to logistics center and finally go to recycling center. If not, and you got the e-waste, and that is the large size, not small size. Large size, you could do these numbers door-to-door systems. And then they make the schedule to collect. This car is come to your house and take your e-waste. It's also free. It's pay for the PRO or producer. So those are go to the recycling center. And the other one is the local government is collect. If you do small items, there is a lot of small items, more than 50 items. They go to some place, that is specific place, and local government and collect those items to its recycling centers. Next one, please. Another one is food waste. You collect the food waste by the RFID system as the waste collection fee systems. It's recycled to animal feed and recycled to compost and produce the biogas using anaerobic digestion. So this one, anaerobic digestion is big size, is the big facilities, but recycle to animal feed and recycle to compost is small size, small capacity. So, but number is many numbers, more than 100 numbers on here. Next one, please. Another one is e-waste recycle center. I mentioned about it's on the PRO. We have the 13 recycling centers, and this one example, they collect the e-waste and make a dismantle or recycle. Then they produce this kind of ingot. So they sell this one. This one is using the aluminum or copper and something like that. Another one is the recycling center in Jeju. They recycle the large home appliance, refrigerator, washing machine, and they using this one. They it's make the shredding, crushing, and they make this kind of raw materials. As I mentioned, we don't have enough resources. So industry want to buy this kind of materials. Next one, please. Also, recycling practice of plastic waste. We collect the plastic on here and separation and recycling, and they make this kind of plastic recycling. Also, another one is they got this kind of collection storage and make the powder and produce the film, a sheet on here. They got the roll on here, and the recycling sheet is stored. It is also, it's not back to sell. But it's not whole of plastic. It's small part of plastic can be recycled. So circular economy is applied to small items, not total waste. Next one, please. This one is, I like to emphasize of sustainable practice of waste, personal protective equipment related to COVID-19. I made the publication in Waste Management Research last year and published by Sage. And two types. This one is hospital and isolated facilities. There's mask on here and glove and gown. That is the personal protective equipment. They collect the specific containers because that can be infectious. So it's so dangerous, and it's storage only one day, same day, and transport, it should be incineration, treated by incineration. No alternatives. But household, a lot of mask is going there and using waste bag and collection transportation. It go to incineration, but they don't have incinerator. It's go to the landfill. But we cannot make any recycling of PPE waste. It's so dangerous. Next one, please. So I'd like to make summary for that. In Korea, regulation and laws that induced resources circulation are being implemented to realize a circular economy. It's for a small part of waste. For sustainable practice, it really works in Korea for resources circulation. Waste flow programs such as separate, discharge, collection, and recycling are conducted by local government or producer manufacturers. Also, we have a long-term master plan and technical roadmaps is established and promote to convert toward a circular economy society through resources circulation. Okay, thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, Professor Reed.
Mhm.
I don't know if we have any specific questions. Unfortunately, that presentation was a little bit longer than we had anticipated. So before I move on to the next speaker, I would also like to recognize the presence of the head of the UNOSD office in Incheon, Tuntu Park. Welcome, Dr. Park. I didn't see that you were online earlier today. I apologize for neglecting you. That presentation was extremely detailed and informative, and I'm sure there are many questions from our experts. However, given the time problems, I think I'll just take one question, and that question is, what particular challenges and problems have you met in implementing programs on sustainable waste management in Korea? In other words, can you mention one or two major problems that the Korean authorities came up against when they were trying to implement these policies, Dr. Park? And could you please be brief in your, Dr. Reed, could you please be brief in your response? Thank you.
So that is one is the still we have the need some kind of regulation for the recycled is the another part of waste. For example, it's not like the it's the municipal solid waste. It's industrial waste. So I didn't mention about the industrial waste. We need some kind of work for industrial waste. The second one is I mentioned about still we have it's the money wise. It's the treatment cost is so expensive in Korea. So we try to reduce the treatment cost to develop the recycling technology. So they mentioned about the efficiency or economic problems.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Reed. Now, David McGinty, the floor is yours.
Sure. Thank you for having me today. As I was introduced, I'm David. I'm the leader of a coalition of CEOs and ministers who are championing the circular economy globally. So it was interesting to have this deep dive first, because we're going to kind of put our eyes on the horizon and think about why this agenda matters and what the kind of political will is behind the movement, as well as industry movement. So as referenced in the Global Sustainable Development Report, which I think undergirds this event, circular economy is stated as an integrated pathway to transformation. And that's exactly how we approach it within PACE and with our partners. And I would say that the movement behind circular economy continues to build. including you see an evolution of the narrative and actions in the G20, for example, going from Japan to Saudi Arabia and coming up with Italy hosting. You see an increasing amount of incorporation of sustainable consumption and production and circular economy in nationally determined commitments leading up to COP26. There's very clear movement, for example, in Latin America on that front. You see a big move on the government side from domestic agendas to regional and value chain approaches, and on the corporate side from individual corporate action to industry level action, whether it's proactive or reactive. And today I'd like to, as we put our eyes to the horizon a little bit, just kind of quickly cover three things. One, why it matters. Two, reframe a little bit of our thinking about development, because that's also the context in which we're having this discussion. It's about the SDGs and coming alongside different countries in their different situations. And then identify some simple ways and quick next steps that we can all pick up. So one, just to level set and answering a lot of the questions that Cole laid out at the beginning, is that for us, circular economy is a mindset and a toolkit. It's not an end in and of itself. And in fact, for many reasons, I prefer to use a longer form label for what we do, which is actually Pace's vision statement, which is we strive for a just and inclusive economy built on circular principles, not for a global circular economy to its own sake, because if you did that, you could design a lot of bad things into an economy. So those circular principles we've heard given in great examples to manage and respect our finite resources, but also enable human and environmental well-being. So I think we're here because we understand the issue, but just to lay it out, more than 1 billion tons of resources enter our economy every year, and only 8.6% of that is recycled and reused again. Can we get that to 100%? I don't know, but there's certainly some basic steps we can take to get it above 60%. And the use of resources has tripled since 1970 and is on target and is on a path to double again by 2050 if business as usual continues. And even at current, without that doubling, we already use about 1.5 Earths to sustainably support our current resource use. So this rampant consumption has a lot of problems. And I think we can tackle 5 areas. One is making better use of the finite resources, which is a lot of what we talk about in circular economy. And often that's why it gets framed as a waste issue. It's about resources and resources alone, but also circular economy is about emissions reduction if you pick the right priorities. So through various reports, you can find these numbers, but circular strategies can reduce our use of resources and cut emissions by 39%. Is our estimation, and can play a crucial role in averting the dangerous impacts of climate change. To give an example there, in a shift towards recycled materials by alleviating our need for virgin plastics and synthetic fibers, essentially significantly reduces fossil fuel use and associated emissions. And changing consumption patterns is crucial. For example, if the average number of times a garment is worn were doubled, greenhouse gas emissions from the textiles industry would be 44% lower. So just wear your clothes longer. That's a circular principle, increase use. On protecting human health and biodiversity, we know the numbers, 9 million deaths per year due to air, water, and soil pollution, and that pollution threatens biodiversity. If we take plastics again as an example, with 300 million tons of plastic waste every year, equivalent to the weight of the human population. I love that fact. That's how much plastic we're putting our weight as humanity into the environment every year. And we have over 54 million tons of electronic waste, with only 17% of that being collected and recycled, despite the high value of the component materials. With this waste, it becomes hazardous for human health and biodiversity when it's mismanaged, which it often is, either leaking into the natural environment or disposed of through open burning, landfills, or substandard recycling. On boosting economies, from the private sector angle, circular economy has been positioned as a $4.5 trillion business opportunity. But what I would also like to highlight is, in addition to those new business models, the $13 billion in cost per year resulting just from plastic waste in the ocean and its impacts on fishing and tourism. So we've got to think of the business opportunity, but also the actual economic cost and burden of a linear economy. And finally, just to put a fine point on jobs. This is an area that is controversial, but it is relatively clear with some new research out from Pew Trust and built on a kind of broader corpus of research, that by switching by some standard circular economy tactics, we could add 6 million net jobs by 2030. But what I really want to emphasize is that net jobs is important, but I think what's more important, to be honest, is having a focus on social and environmental justice and looking at transitions. And while we look to increase net jobs, looking at how circularity can add to improve formal work and improve working conditions for informal laborers. And right now, over 15 million people worldwide work as waste pickers, as informal waste pickers, salvaging reusable and recyclable material from garbage. We can make that a true profession in formal, respectable, and well remunerated labor. So just kind of two more points here. One is, I would refer to a report that we put out with Circle Economy last year, which is really reframing how we think about development. Just to say that if you do a scatter chart and you put all the world's countries on the chart, with one axis being human development, the other axis being consumption of resources, you would find that there is no country living with a desired level of human development and a sustainable level of consumption and production. So no one is in that safe ecological zone. And in that sense, there is no developed country. And so we have to really look at ourselves, no matter where we sit, and really think about how we go from the situation we are in, whether on a human development or on an environmental development perspective, and how do we get to a place that is sustainable and equitable to help everyone get into that safe space. That report that we put out gives some examples and reclusters countries based on these types of characteristics, as opposed to the typical measures of GDP per capita and formal jobs. And so a final point, which is something that we really worked on across our coalition, and I'll just to link it to the point of this event, that the focus of this forum this week has been to begin a more in-depth exploration of different entry points for transformation that were identified in the Sustainable Development Report. And what I offer you today is a series of reports that we just released a few weeks ago called the Circular Economy Action Agendas, which are, the real first attempt to set global priorities for action in the circular economy. These aren't new reports, it's not new research. What it is the product of a year of brokering with over 200 experts, 100 leading organizations, from the UN Environment Program to ministries of environment, industry partners, NGOs, and so on, who've been working on circular economy for the last 7 to 8 years in real intention, and getting them to agree on what the specific calls to action are in plastics, electronics, textiles, food, and what we call capital equipment, the big expensive stuff that has a ton of value and a ton of materials. To agree on what the priorities are. And so for each of those areas, we have 10 calls to action that give them more specific areas for businesses, for governments, and for researchers to take the next step. And what we're anticipating is this will have an accelerating impact by getting everyone aligned and showing how much actual momentum there is behind this movement. So I'll end with a few cross-cutting things that came out. So no matter which of these materials or industries we look at, looking at design standards and labeling is a common area for action that's going to trigger greater scale. The second is we have a significant problem and opportunity in addressing global trade and creating green lanes of trade where we need to start. The circular economy pushes us to start looking at global value chains. And now we have to actually start taking action to do that, which requires moving circular economy out of a domestic agenda into an international agenda for most countries and regions. The third area of commonality is, of course, looking at incentives and subsidies to enable functioning markets. This is a place where, circular economy and climate action are very similar. Carbon pricing, if we have functioning carbon markets, then that would enable a lot of moves towards circular approaches by setting the right market signals and market conditions. The other, which I mentioned a little bit before, is around decent work. This surprised me. Personally, I'm very interested in it as someone coming from the international development world, that decent work came out very clearly as an area where we need more research, we need more policy, and we need companies to invest more in considering the implications on jobs and their value chains in circular economy. And then a final point is around metrics. A common area that comes out there in the last few years, there's been a lot of bubbling up of new initiatives on measuring, defining what is circular economy, measuring it from the private sector side, from governments as well, and then figuring out whether that should be standalone or independent metrics or integrated into existing frameworks. So I'm happy to discuss those in more depth because they are quite nuanced and quite a lot of them. So finally, just thanks for that. Again, I would point people to the Circular Gap Report again this year, the new version, which shows the links more clearly to CE and circular economy and climate. CITRA, if you're a country and you're wondering, how do I get started on this? CITRA, which is the Finnish Innovation Fund, put out last year a circular roadmap guidebook, which gives kind of the 10 steps that they went through. Again, from a Finnish standpoint, it needs to be contextualized for your country or city. But it is a pretty straightforward way to begin talking with citizens, with communities about circular economy, identifying what their priorities need to be and moving forward. And again, referring back to PACE's website for these action agendas. So of course, I'm happy to be here and welcome any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, David. We do have, you've obviously sparked quite a bit of interest in the chat room. One question I have is, you were talking about how we can save emissions from the textile industry by wearing your clothes twice as often, but isn't the downside of that you lose jobs? Because what you're saying is you reduce the production of textiles, and therefore you reduce the labor force, which reduces jobs. And then in almost the next breath, you said, oh, but we're going to create, I think it was 6 million new jobs, which sounds like a lot, but in the world working population, 6 million jobs is basically a drop in the bucket. So the question is one of balance and compensation. That's the first question. There's a couple of questions that come from participants. One in particular from Sophie Morgan, which is actually, she's one of our most popular participants. She wants to know from Dr. Ree what incentives are there for citizens to comply with the new rules, which seem, because they appear to be penalized for their waste, she says. So perhaps Professor Ree can come in on that a little bit later. For David, we have a request from Licia Sanialu, who says, could you please give us a precise title of the 2020 report you've been mentioning? I think it's a series of reports, but carry on.
Sure, yeah. I can also, I can make a post in the chat as well.
Yes, of course.
Is that right? Yeah, I'll put the links to the reports that I mentioned in the chat. But it's at pacecircular.org. You can find the reports there. So on the impact question, so one of the things that I'm just to be personal about, I'm most proud of that we did in the last year was a lot of people come to the circular economy agenda from different standpoints. Businesses started, some started from an innovation standpoint, some started because of resource scarcity and fluctuations in commodity prices or threats and risk in their global supply chain. Some countries come out of economic drivers, some come out of protectionism, some come out of environmental impacts, and a whole host of other reasons. So because of that, what you'll hear a lot of times around circular economy is, well, we hear this a lot around a lot of initiatives, is we kind of throw in all the impacts at the same time as if they're all concurrently, beneficial. and this is why I started out by saying circular economy is not the end in of itself. It must have a purpose to help us have the world that we're trying to create. So these statistics do line up. However, you'll find in our reports a much more nuanced statement of trade-offs. And so I think sometimes in getting the movement going, we can oversell the benefits of circular economy as if it is a magic bullet. But in most of these instances, we did a very simple thing with a little pie charts on the impacts. We have 5 impact areas, and just said, on climate, if we do achieve this vision in textiles, where we are, wearing for longer and wasting less, what's the impact on climate? Is it a benefit? Is it a trade-off? Is it a negative impact, or is it unknown? And then you can make the decision. So for the unknowns, our recommendation is not to scale. Our recommendation is for research. Where it's a trade-off or a negative impact, the question is about mitigation. And is a strong enough benefit that you should prioritize it? And what I would say is this is going to be a very fast response to a big issue, is in those different countries and different economies, your priorities are going to be different on the circular economy. And in developed countries with lots of existing infrastructure or stock, you're going to have one type of strategy about prolonging use and reusing that stock that's in the country, and about keeping those resources within your boundary, whatever that is, a value chain or a geography, for as long as possible, as close to the user as possible. If you're in a high growth or more emerging economy, the strategies and focuses are going to be on different areas, and you might be looking more at decent work as a clear benefit. And I would say that take that waste statistic that I laid out there with informal labor. That is mostly a LMIC opportunity, but has perhaps more of a trade-off on work in middle income or upper income countries. And I think that's just what we need to do. Now we've gotten the momentum going. People are at the table, they're standing up and listening to that circular economy can help us have the world we want. Now we just need to have the very specific technical policy recommendations and not oversell the positive benefits.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we're going to have to go on to our next speaker, who is Grażyna Borowska from ASEF. She likes to be called Gina, but I prefer her full name. It's over to you, Grażyna.
Thank you so much, Colm. I use Gina because it's easier usually for the people to refer to me. And this actually increased the number of questions at different conferences when we were able to pronounce to whom they want to ask the question. Before I will start with the presentation that is looking at the circular economy, in particular at single-use plastic, I wanted to refer to what the previous speakers mentioned, and also to a couple of your questions that you said, and then I will further on try to address some of the issues that popped up, also for the benefit of using time efficiently. One thing is related with the circular economy as such, and very popular belief or very popular conception that kind of makes me uneasy, which is related to scarcity of resources. At many conferences and many scientists, many excellent research institutes do refer to this scarcity of resources that in some cases, I mean, I'm not saying that everybody has this approach, but quite often this approach originates from the Club of Rome report from the 70s about limits to growth. And circular economy kind of takes it to another level. So when you have been asking at the beginning of the session, is this just a trending thing or is just the new concept? I think circular economy actually allows us to move beyond this assumption that the resources are scarce, because we have the unique opportunity of looking at designing, shaping, producing, consuming, everything with the whole circle in mind, which means like when we start using something, we can see through what is happening at different stages of life of the product. and then it can further either get reused or it just disappears, like multiple innovation that have resulted in different products, soluble plastics, different kind of packaging that doesn't have impact on environment. I'm not talking about microplastic polluting ocean. I'm just saying there are already solutions in place that do not get enough recognition or support or subsidies to look into it. But I will get back to this later. Now I will continue with the presentation. If I can see it, that would be great. If we can go to the second slide. Okay. So Asia Europe Foundation is the intergovernmental organization that is looking at what is happening in 51 member states of Asia Europe meeting. And the main reason of existence is related with bridging civil society and governments and looking into what is in between and what are the issues of importance for Asia and Europe as continents. However, it is a political process, so it also includes Australia and New Zealand nowadays, which is extending towards Asia Pacific. And I'm saying this because this is the scope of the research we have been doing, which is looking into 51 countries. We started this research 2 years ago. It took us over a year to complete it, also because of COVID-19. And this research originated in our previous mapping of what is happening with SDG 12 implementation, which is sustainable consumption and production in ASEAN countries. So when we have been doing this mapping, we discovered that countries kind of struggle with sustainable and consumption as a concept, not because the concept is difficult, it's more because it's so vast and so broad, and it has so many stakeholders and it's connected on so many levels that if you do a map of connections and you try to look for leverage points, it's challenging. And we have been watching different countries and different organizations trying to look into leverage points. And then we just decided that we as organization can focus on certain things. So we chose single-use plastic. And this is something we decided to look at more, because in some of the voluntary national reports that countries have submitted, the plastic was mentioned. So this was something that we decided, okay, there's a lot of policies regarding sustainable consumption and production. Most of the countries actually are doing something. They have it integrated, they have it endorsed. But we wanted to see, okay, but what does it mean in practice? Because there's a lot of policies in place, and every country in this 51 member states have some kind of policy, sometimes multiple policies, but it's not very clear what are actual implications. Can I have next slide? So we look at this mostly doing desk research and survey, and then we have selected some companies and some NGOs to do targeted interview. Next, please. And then next one, because this is just showing geographical scope. And then findings from the review, if I can have next slide. So we started with the assumption that is also not new, which is refuse or reduce. And I just wanted to also underline it because in the previous presentation, there was a lot of focus on recycling, and it is very important because we are struggling with a lot of waste, not only plastic, but in general, waste management is one of the challenges. Not just in Asia, it's also very challenging in Europe and all over the world. And for me, what is striking a little bit is this fact that when there is discussion, more often than not, there is this approach towards talking about recycling mostly and waste management. And there's not so much talk actually about innovation, redesign of the product, the whole discussion of how standards are being approved. When you have procedures for approving certain goods and starting to do innovation and in producing new products, there is not a requirement that forces the designer or the company to actually think in the circular way. Okay, I am designing the product. Garment was also mentioned today earlier. And then there's this very cheap way of doing fabric that can be easily discarded because people buy it cheap, so they don't have a need to reuse it multiple times, and it's fashionable to use specific model. When you add plastic to existing fabric, which makes this product impossible to recycle by default. But it is allowed because it's cheap, because nobody thought of it, because there is no proper infrastructure in place, because there is no policy regulation that is looking into it, because there are different priorities, but also because it's not being shared enough or taught at the universities or discussed, or it's not being a priority. Like when we look at what is happening nowadays, impossible things are happening. Nobody 2 years ago would think that we are going to have global pandemic and we will not be able to travel between countries. Nobody have thought what kind of implication it would have to work from home and how nature will bounce back to life because of reduced human activity and reduced pollution. I think it's really important to kind of focus and nurture innovation and outliers and different people that that think outside the box, and really focus a lot of effort on those initiatives that can be scaled up that are looking at different things. Because there's already a lot of discussion about recycling, and I think we do not really need more discussion that recycling is important. We need to recycle, we need technology, we need money, because the things are very simple. If there is enough recyclable materials that generate profit for the companies to recycle, they will do it. Why certain things are not happening in Asia, specifically in Southeast Asia or in countries like Laos or Cambodia? It's because the number of waste that can be generated and collected by the companies is not enough to generate profit for the companies. And it's not something that is new. Companies knew it. We did have discussed with them, like even recycling metal. For Asia, there would have to be centralized collection point that would gather all the metal, but also it would require educating people that do not have it naturally, that, oh, this is something we can recycle. Moreover, when there is a product being introduced, it's very difficult to recycle it. For example, the very trending electric cars by Tesla, when you do batteries, it's impossible to recycle them. So basically, there is still this approach that there is innovation, but the innovation, even from outliers or like trending companies, not always have this component when you look further, when you think, okay, what's going to happen next? The battery is going to be used, and then what? It's similar with solar panels. It is changing, especially in solar panels industry, but it is also not so easy to recycle the materials. And when we look at this, fair enough, we were trying to look at the initiatives that look at the reduction of use and reuse. And the good thing, there's quite so many of it. However, those initiatives are mostly done by non-profit, either social enterprises or NGOs or different types of foundations. And usually recycle and recovery is done by companies, because this is where money can be easily retrieved. Can I have next one? So this is just to give you the idea what was the size of companies we looked at. We mostly look at the smaller companies. It is also because when you ask corporations, sometimes like we didn't get very warm welcome with our research, to be very frank, in the sense that first of all, it's difficult to see what they do in specific country because they operate globally. If you ask the company that is based in country A, they would say, please contact headquarters because they have CSR department. Then you ask headquarters, and headquarters will say, oh, but we are not really doing things nationally. So by default, we decided not to look so much into corporations. I believe it might be very different if those were included. We looked at the small and medium enterprises, NGOs, and this is the size of the entities we looked at. Can I have next one? Next slide. Okay. And then majority of projects were initiated for non-profit organizations. And this is when we were looking at this. And then when we were looking at the correlation with the policy, most of these initiatives were not triggered by the policy. There is legislation in Europe that is enforcing plastic reduction. And then there is, this is something that is very important for companies. However, the initiatives mostly that are quite thriving and quite ongoing are those that have started a couple of years ago, and they are doing quite well. Can I have next one? And then when we look at the business opportunities, there is mostly focus on recycling and collection. And the reason also why we looked at the study is that we were very interested what will happen after China stops accepting the plastic waste from developing countries, or like from different countries, let's put it that way. Because also when we have a discussion about what is happening, in general, there is this very strong narrative that plastic waste is developing world problem, which is not entirely showing the whole picture, because there is equally, as also previous speaker mentioned, there is equally the issue of how much waste is in general being recycled in the particular single-use plastic. When we are looking at the very small percentage, it is 1-digit percentage, it is nowhere even close to 50%. And it is mostly because of the fact that the waste is still being shipped to developing countries. There is now like quite many plastics we can find in the ocean, and when you look at it, they are coming from all over the world. Can I have next one? And then we looked at the innovations, because what we believe it really makes a difference when people try to change the approach towards products. But it's not enough, and it's not enough for different types of reasons. One, it is because initiatives are mostly smaller. Two, it is because there's not enough funding in the system. Three, it is also because by nature, doing innovation, when we look beyond simple improvements, costs money and requires R&D facility. And this is also something that could be looked at or should be looked at when we are thinking about different types of educational programs. Can I have next one? Can I have next one? I will just speed up a little bit. Okay. But when we look at the opportunities to scale up what is already happening, most of the projects can be scaled up. And this is not something that I'm saying easily, because when I say scale up, I don't mean do as, for example, Korea do for Lao PDR, for example. When we are talking about scalability, we are looking, okay, is it possible to use this solution in another country? And then what does it mean to scale up? It can be not always product, it can be also the idea. We had in our research, we also did, like when we started thinking about it and designing it, we did some searching also what is already happening. And there is a lot of businesses that decided, for example, in a hospitality industry that is now suffering a lot from existing situation, when they try to do their own garden, when they are trying to produce zero waste at the facility itself, when they are looking into cleaning water and treating water waste on their own initiative. And this is possible when you have enough volume of customers and when you have enough volume of business that will make it profitable for you. And then, so when I'm saying scalability of projects, I'm not saying, oh, just have recycling machine in supermarkets everywhere, because those solutions will not work for developing countries that very often do not have any type of waste management system. And it's not possible for them to actually do something about it. So for those countries, usually the best solution is to reduce the use or think about innovative products. However, saying that, I have to admit that this could very well apply to developed countries, because why not? Thinking about reduction of the volume of waste that is being used I think like I'm living in Singapore. It is so easy to get rid of waste here. Like it works very smoothly. Singapore is very efficient in providing infrastructure. However, the waste management system is very much still populated by humans. So like me shooting down or throwing away the rubbish doesn't end there. There is a person that is dividing it. There is the person that is deciding what can be retrieved, what is still staying here. And this is really, when we are talking about duty jobs, this is really tedious job because of how the products are being designed. They're not easy to recycle, even for consumers, if they really want to try, because we also need to look at the consumer behavior. It's really complicated. Sometimes when you have like milk packaging, you do not know if this is paper or does it have aluminum inside, and then there's plastic cup. I mean, why these products exist? How can you divide this? Like, it's very complicated, even at the household in developing country, to be conscious consumer. So that is also something that is in play. So when we looked at this, we're trying to be mindful. And by design, most of the things were simple solutions that were looking into reduction of the goods. Next one, please. And then when we are looking at the barriers, in general, just to summarize, I'm like finishing my presentation. In general, there's lack of or limited availability of regulation and standards. This is what I was saying. There's this issue related with the fact that we can just produce and innovate almost everything. There are some regulations when we look at for example, at the pharma industry. There's a lot of regulation of that the product needs to have specific use and so on and so forth. But in general, if you design something and there is no tax incentive to reduce specific waste or impact on environment, then usually for the business models, the cheaper version prevails. And then there is also public and private funding that could support initiative until they become profitable. So this is all the seed funding that can be done for different initiatives. This is being done in general, like when we are looking at the IT industry. This is something that has been working so well when there is idea and then it gets seed funding and then it can be scaled up and become profitable. Then there's also this insufficient collection and recycling infrastructure that doesn't allow to efficiently address the problem of plastic waste. And then lack of awareness or interest or commitment. Sometimes it's difficult to say what is actually the reason, as well as lack of coordination along the whole plastic production chain. Next one. Thank you. When we look at the impacts of COVID-19, actually for the NGOs and companies we looked at, it didn't make that much difference in the sense that there's always waste. The waste didn't really reduce, actually it has increased when we are looking at the number of single-use packaging, because this was our focus. There was a lot of approach towards protective equipment and sanitizers for medical use, and also like the increase in volume of the medical use, and the education activities mostly used online. I'm pretty sure I'm not sure how much time I have. Con, can you help me if I already got it?
I'm afraid you're out of time. I'm sorry about that. Fascinating presentation, Gina. Thank you so much. There was a question that you answered before I was able to ask it about transformation and scaling up. So for now, we leave you in peace. We may come back to you because, as you know, this is a slightly shorter session than the normal ones. And I do want to get to Jen Fraser, who got up at 2 o'clock this morning to be here for us. So Jen, if you're there, are you ready to make your presentation? And if so, please begin now.
Perfect. Yeah. Oh, there we go. I can share my screen.
You have about 15 minutes because I'd like to get some questions in at the end. You're going to present a very local perspective, what has been done, what can be done, and we're very much looking forward to your experience. Thank you. Please go ahead, 10 to 15 minutes.
15 minutes. All right. Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here to talk about the circular economy movement on Vancouver Island. So my name is Jen Fraser. I'm the Manager of Project Development and Communications at Synergy Foundation. And as Colin mentioned, I am presenting today from Canada in the province of British Columbia from my hometown, Victoria, which is the capital city of British Columbia. Victoria is located on the southern tip of Vancouver Island. Vancouver Island as a whole is just over 31,000 square kilometers. Our island is roughly the size of the country of Belgium, or 1/3 the size of South Korea. Our island is home to 870,000 people, nearly half of which live in the Greater Victoria region. Vancouver Island is well known for its natural beauty and rich, long-standing Indigenous culture. I would like to respectfully acknowledge that I am presenting today from the unceded traditional territories of the Lekwungen peoples, known as Esquimalt and Mountain Nations. So Synergy Foundation, where I work, is a nonprofit that started back in 2013. At Synergy, our mission is to share ideas, spark innovation, and activate change to steer our economy and communities towards a more regenerative future. We do this through our 3 core programs: the Vancouver Island Green Business Collective, an affordable program to help small and medium-sized businesses implement sustainability initiatives and reduce their environmental impact. FED, which focuses on growing a movement of urban agriculture and food-focused communities. And Project Zero, a program to educate on the topic of circular economy and to support the development and implementation of circular concepts in the region. In my presentation today, I'll be focusing on the work we've accomplished through Project Zero.
Jen, you're a bit indistinct. Can you either speak closer to the microphone or?
Yeah, for sure. Okay.
Okay.
Is this okay now?
I think that's better. Yeah.
There we go. All right. So Project Zero officially launched back in the start of 2019. Previously, we had identified that no one else on Vancouver Island was tackling circular economy beyond our research scope. So we saw an opportunity here to dive in. Some of the major benefits to implementing a circular economy locally include positive environmental impact, lower carbon emissions, and an increase in innovation, entrepreneurial opportunities, and job creation. Our greatest accomplishment so far with Project Zero would be our Business Incubator program. This is a virtual program where we support entrepreneurs and new startup ideas to start a strong foundation for their business that fits within a circular economy. So through our 8-month program, we work with the entrepreneurs to develop their business plan, their pitch to investors, they learn about running a business, and they connect with coaches and like-minded entrepreneurs. We've had 15 ventures graduate from our program so far, and I'll speak about a few of them later on in my presentation. A few of the other projects we offer include a business accelerator program. So we work with businesses one-on-one to support them with their circular economy advancements. We have worked with remote First Nations communities to help them establish their own recycling depots so that waste is not just all going to landfills. In terms of community initiatives, we are currently working with an American city to plan their circular economy campus at their local landfill site. And corporate strategy, one example here would be that we're working with a carpet company to turn one of their waste into an added revenue stream. So now that you have an overview of kind of what we're doing in this circular economy space, I want to dive into why this shift is needed. So first, I want to make sure we're all clear on the linear economy. So that includes extracting resources from the earth, we transform them into goods, they are transported around the globe, we purchase and use the goods, and then we dispose of them when they are no longer of use to us. This is also known as the take, make, waste model. In a circular economy, we look to design waste and pollution out of the system by keeping resources and manufactured materials in our economy for as long as possible. The economy is powered by renewable energy, and resources for our goods come from existing materials and renewable resources. During the production stage, goods are designed with the end of life in mind. That means we're creating quality products that can re-enter our economy once its useful life is over. Distribution continues, but there are more local offerings available. And as consumers, we make conscious decisions about the products we intend to buy. This sounds good in theory, but as David mentioned earlier today, only 8.6% of the materials is currently looped back into our system. I know this is a small number, but it also means there's a huge opportunity to improve. I'm now going to tie in some local business examples to our 5 re-entry processes. The first re-entry process is reduce. So this stage starts before you even make your purchasing decision. It's about determining if the item you intend to buy adds real value to your life, and if it does, has it been designed to loop back into the system. Disposable coffee cups, plastic wrap are a few items we come into possession of out of convenience. Other times we buy products not because we need them, but because they are on sale. It's a bad habit we're accustomed to repeating. But if we stop to think before buying, we might see there's some other options. Like trading that disposable coffee cup for a reusable one, or getting coffee from a shop that participates in a cup share program. The NULA project is one of our Incubator grads and offers a cup share program. Participating coffee shops all stock the same cups, allowing the cups to be returned to any shop involved. Programs like this help businesses connect communities, they reduce unnecessary waste, and support municipal government waste reduction goals. For example, in Victoria, if we replace 20% of disposable cups in the downtown core, we would divert 1.5 million cups per year. Other changes that could include swapping from plastic wrap to a reusable and compostable product like beeswax wrap. And you can also choose to shop at zero waste stores when possible. On the island, we have an array of zero waste home and bulk stores, and our first zero waste grocery store opened up in 2018 in Victoria. Our linear economy pushes the idea of mass consumption, especially in North America. A circular economy encourages us to be more mindful with our purchasing decisions. All right, next we have repair and reuse. So we can intentionally buy products that can be reused and repaired, and for products we already own, but looking for ways to extend their useful life. All the items here can either be reused or repaired, like getting your shoes resoled or having an appliance service. We have a new technical gear repair shop starting up in Victoria. So if you have a tent with a hole or a jacket that is no longer waterproof, they can make your goods useful once again. Basecamp is able to extend the life of our goods and has identified a way to add value to existing products. And living on an island, it's not uncommon that we have to ship our goods off island to be fixed. So this helps us become more self-sufficient. Redistribute. In this process, a good has become obsolete to you, but to another it still has value. Donating clothes to a charity or a library would fit in here. Similar to a book library, we can think about a tool library where we borrow and rent a tool or piece of equipment. Or a bike share program. Bikes and vehicles spend most of their time sitting unused. Sharing programs like this help us to reduce the idle time, they save people money, and allow more people to get benefits from the same good. Recondition. The final 2 stages typically require more time, energy, and resources than the other processes we have identified. In recondition, products are taken in for upgrading or value-add processes. Ergo Eco Solutions offers both services and products. First, they provide restaurants with a collection service for their used cooking oil. They then transform that used cooking oil into biodiesel for vehicles, and they recently launched a new product, a petroleum-free concrete release agent for the construction industry. Another way waste is being collected from restaurants is used chopsticks. So Chop Value sets up collection bins at interested restaurants and then turns them into everything from tabletops to home decor to yoga blocks. They have reclaimed and transformed over 32 million chopsticks into new goods. And last, we have Recycle. This is the final option available and most energy-intensive stage. Products are broken down to their separate materials and re-enter the production process to create new products. Anion makes clothing from salvaged wool materials. They work directly with an Italian supplier who gathers discarded wool sweaters, suits, blankets, and turns them into basic thread and then creates a new wool fabric. In comparison to new fabric production, the process is less intensive, it creates new job opportunities, and allows for transparency across the supply chain. Construction waste can take up a lot of space in landfills. Unbuilders is a Vancouver-based company that disassembles homes and properties rather than demolishing them. So when a house or building is no longer usable, it is typically demolished and most of the materials end up in the landfill, which results in a huge waste bill. Through the Unbuilders process, they preserve as much material as they can for reuse and recycle what is beyond saving. This results in a 95% salvage rate on their project. This process creates new jobs, it saves resources and materials that can be given new life, and there is substantially less waste headed to our landfills. Not only is this better for our environment, but Unbuilders has proved that it is possible and it can be done at a lower cost than a demo thanks to federal and provincial tax credits we have available here. Plastic, as we've heard, can be a tough waste to work with, but more and more progress is being made in this space. And we're seeing more kind of micro recycling centers pop up. Flipside Plastics will be addressing some of Victoria's plastic waste by collecting some of our recyclable plastics, breaking it down, and transforming it into other goods like coasters or plant pots. To my knowledge, all of our plastic waste is currently being shipped off island. I do want to make it clear that an item does not have to be exclusive to one part of this process. It can, in fact, be linked to many of them. So take the Anion shirt, for example. Let's say I need a new long sleeve shirt. I have a lot of options out there at varying price points. In the end, I decide to spend my money on a quality and durable good made of natural fiber. Down the road, I tear the sleeve and I have it stitched up. Down the road, I figure out it's no longer my style and I either decide to donate it, sell it, or give it to a friend. And finally, years down the road, it's no longer usable and it is recycled and turned into a new wool good. I will conclude my presentation with a few suggested next steps on what you can do if you want to take action in this space. So first, when making purchases, whether it be for you, your home, your work, really put some consideration into the purchasing decision. Does it add value, and are there options out there that have a lower environmental impact? Second, for our business professionals listening in, look for opportunities to not only reduce company waste, but challenge yourself and your team to find new uses for waste streams you have. Could you collaborate with a business, a university? As you've seen today, waste is a resource. Sometimes we just have to get creative. And last, find other learning opportunities to explore this concept further. If it's not already talked about in your place of work, start that conversation. For government, is circular economy or even green economy part of your municipal, provincial, or federal plan? For manufacturers, have you ever considered switching virgin materials for recycled ones, or found other alternatives instead of landfilling your waste? All right, and I will wrap up there. Yeah, just in time. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Jen. That was enlightening, and I'm sure that our participants have rarely had such a detailed and specific explanation of what recycling and the circular economy actually means in practice. So thank you so much. We are running out of time very quickly here. There are a couple of things I'd like to say just before we go. I wish we had more time for questions. We could be talking for another couple of hours, I think. What I found fascinating was the links that go through right from the beginning, from the Korean national activity through to the global perspective provided by David, and then the regional research done by ASEF, and finally the on-the-ground physical hands-on experience that Jen gave us. It really brings this whole concept together as something which is unified. It's not disparate. It may be complex and it may be difficult, but it's something that is one whole process that we need to understand and we need to look at. There was one thing that Jen said, and I'd like to exploit my position as moderator to ask her the question. This incubator program, yesterday we heard about, it was either yesterday or the day before, but during the week anyway, we were talking about how to encourage innovation in developing countries, particularly African developing countries. And as we know, the business of recycling, and David referenced it today, David McGinty, the process of recycling in developing countries is often seen as the job right at the bottom of the, I was going to say the food chain, but economic activity. But in fact, the way Jen puts it, with the incubator program and something that Gradzina said as well, this is actually a business opportunity. It's not a dirty industry. It's actually a clean industry. It may be a clean-up industry, but at the end, it's a clean industry. Would you like to give us just 15 seconds on that, Jen? Do you think that this incubator program is something that can be transferred to a developing context rather than a relatively wealthy little island off the coast of Canada?
Yeah, definitely. I think all of our waste ending up in our landfills, there are so many other opportunities for it. And if other countries can kind of create their own incubator programs or find other ways to support entrepreneurs, I think people can get creative. They want to have their own businesses. I think there'd be a lot of opportunity there for sure.
Thank you, and thank you to all the participants. I'm going to turn over to David before I come back to you with a different hat on for the final session. David O'Connor, are you there and ready to do the sum up?
I think you've already done it, Con. So I don't think there's a need. We have limited time, so let's move. I think you did a great job there of summing up the interesting presentations.
In that case, I have to ask if, before I go, actually, we do have a little bit of time because there are only two speakers, well, including yourself, David. There are only two speakers in this final session. David O'Connor, who's going to be presenting the Incheon communique, and I will be just showing you the draft report of the whole forum. Then we have Ambassador Faber from ASEF, and then Jean d'Aragon, who will be representing the UNOSD. So that's just three speakers. I think we've got a couple of minutes if anybody wants to pose any burning questions to Dr. Reed, to Professor Reed, to David McGinty, Gina Boawska, or if any panelists want to make a comment. I think I can give you 5 minutes if there's anybody would like to come in there. The silence is deafening. Gina,
I can get the ball rolling with the question.
Okay.
The other day we heard from a speaker speaking about the mineral industries of the Andes, and of course many of the developing countries represented here, and who are trying.
David, can you turn your video on, please?
Okay. Yeah, many of the developing countries in the audience and trying to industrialize are resource-intensive economies, mineral resources primarily, but also other resources. And when the question was posed to the speaker about the recycling of mineral resources, he said, well, most of the consumption is done in the developed countries, and so basically the recycling will happen there and not in our countries. And that does raise a question which has puzzled me for a while, which is, if circular economy were to go from 8.6% of materials consumed to 60%, how would that affect the global demand for minerals extracted from these countries? Clearly, it will have a big impact, and that means that they also need to be thinking about diversifying their economies, moving into other areas of economic activity so as not to be hit, just as you have, stranded assets in oil and gas from addressing climate change. There will be stranded assets in minerals to some degree, although there are minerals that are in great demand with the transition, as was pointed out also, lithium and other things for batteries, copper, but not all. And so that's a question, I guess, for the people who are experts on the circular economy, but David McGinty in particular.
Sure, thanks for that. I mean, certainly that's an issue. And you can see some of the countries that are most active, for example, in Latin America, Chile, one of the first countries in Latin America to really take circular economy by the horns, so to say. But also Colombia, Canada, doing a lot of work and thinking through what circular economy means domestically, and also for technology transfer, and Canada in the world. And you see that difference, like I was saying on that scatter chart, the difference of countries that are, I would kind of distinguish. But yeah, let me make one distinction between countries that have extractive-based economies that are primarily oil and gas based versus extractive that are minerals, and then extractive that are rare earth minerals based. The rare earth minerals are really driving and have a key role in the energy transition and others, in the continuation of the digital expansion, et cetera. So there's some minerals, even like copper, which are absolutely necessary for our continued renewable energy transition. The countries are really looking at, I would say, the opportunities. One of the key levers that's undergirding this conference, this event, is looking at governance. So let me maybe present a thought, an idea, just to provoke, is to rethink about the governance of materials. And so we talk about governance of institutions, of countries, of nations, but governance of materials and what that means for countries that have resources, virgin resources, and countries that have then stock in place for recycling or whatever. And that's, I think, where we'll eventually head with the circular economy, is to really relook at that institutional structure. And you might look at countries that have large stocks of materials continuing to own, the same way we talk about extended producer responsibility. What about extended ownership of materials, where those producers or countries maintain some type of rights over a longer period of time to the minerals that come into their supplies?
Thank you, David. I'm afraid we're going to have to stop there because we have our formal closing ceremony coming up. This part of the program consists of 3 presentations, 3 and a bit. The first one will be David O'Connor introducing the Incheon Communique, which is a document that represents the conclusions of the forum on behalf of all of the participants, and so everybody will get a chance to see this before we publish it officially. David will do an introduction of that. After that, we have Ambassador Baba from ASEF, who will close the forum on behalf of his organization, followed by Jean Darnian, who will do the same for UNOSD. So part one is now closed. Please do not leave. Part two now begins. Over to you, David, to talk about the Incheon communique, what's behind it and what's in it. Thank you, David.
Thank you, Con. Well, what's behind it is this meeting. And each year at the Sustainable Development Transformation Forum, in the past, in-person meetings, but this year virtual, we have tried to distill some of the main policy messages that emerged from the discussions and to crystallize them in a short communique that would be reviewed, commented upon, and ultimately adopted in a sense by the participants. This doesn't commit you to anything that would send you to jail, but but in any case, it's meant to get a sense of the house, you might say, of what have we learned and what can we share with others who were not lucky enough to be a part of this meeting. And so this year's event, as you know, is about COVID recovery, post-COVID recovery, recovering better and greener, but specifically with a focus on sustainable industrial development, SDG 9, including the infrastructure to support that and the innovation to catalyze that. So we've had a number of rich sessions, but I'd start out by saying that there's a general sense that we're in a deep crisis now, an immediate crisis from the pandemic, but we're in a longer-term crisis with climate change, and the one compounds the other in a sense. But in any case, crisis can present opportunities, and this is true of both the COVID crisis and the climate crisis. And so as countries think about investing in recovery and re-energizing their economies, we all have an opportunity to evaluate critically how we were developing pre-pandemic and pre our knowledge of the urgency of climate action, and to begin to move along different trajectories if that is warranted. And that's going to be essential, whether you're a high emitter or not. The imperative of global decarbonization is going to change the way everybody does business, everybody works. From the oil and gas rich developing countries who are having to reinvent themselves and move into new areas, to other developing countries. We have also a big challenge and opportunity in some parts of the developing world, particularly in Africa with large young populations. And that does present a challenge to employ all these young people productively, but also an opportunity because there is a growth dividend if you have so many young and productive people entering the labor force, but they have to be put into productive work. And so the challenge is we have growing automation around the world, but the opportunity is that this will take some time, and there is a window now, arguably at least, for late industrializers to capture investments from some of those countries who have grown exponentially on the basis of labor-intensive industries over the last 20, 30, 40 years. Most recently, of course, China. And we heard how China, is on the cusp already beginning to relocate some of its more labor-intensive production elsewhere. And countries who are proactive in attracting that investment may stand their countries in good stead and be able to employ some of their young people productively. But an experimental approach is needed and warranted. You don't want to put all your eggs in one basket. So setting up things like industrial parks one at a time and seeing if you can get the ball rolling, create some momentum, doesn't involve a large upfront cost, but it is scalable if it works. But jump-starting industrial development is complex. It's difficult. Not many countries in the world have done it successfully, to be honest, and no country has had successful decarbonized development up until now. But everyone is working at it, and progress has been made, and we heard about some of that progress. Very interestingly, in the case of the materials processing industry, and we expect that industry will grow tremendously in the emerging economies of Africa and parts of Asia and parts of Latin America and perhaps the Middle East, as countries develop, as they urbanize, and as the middle class grows, where housing will become a major source of demand growth. And there are now new technologies being developed by leading companies in this space to produce low-cost housing sustainably and to reduce their own carbon footprints in the most carbon-intensive industry in the world. And so we heard some inspiring stories there from the leader in this industry, in the cement and concrete and building materials industry. But sustainable low-carbon industrialization just doesn't happen spontaneously. It requires forward-looking, adaptive governance, good governance based on long-term planning, and that is one of the elements that is not yet in place in all countries, but certainly needs to be in order to accelerate this process. We also need investment, and we talked a bit about that. There is a large pool of capital in the world. It's not like capital is scarce. Interest rates are at a historic low, which suggests that capital is not scarce. But of course, it's not going to low-income developing countries in large quantities because of risk factors, lack of productive, profitable opportunities for private investors. And so public investment, international public investment will play an important role in the meantime to get infrastructure in place to begin to create the conditions that can attract more private investment. But even where there is private capital, it doesn't always go to where it is most needed. And so you have areas of the innovation and production chain, product chain, which lack capital because investors don't want to take a risk at early stage investment in prototyping, in proof of concept type of investments. And so some sort of blended finance, some sort of public support, mitigating risks of private investors, creating public supported venture capital funds, government supported incubators. These are possibilities to address this funding gap to support innovation in developing countries. Government also needs to provide some of the facilities that are public goods in a sense, or shared goods, I guess club goods would be a better term, used by industry, for example, to be able to standardize its products, to achieve certain quality standards, test those products to be able to export to global markets. So standards and testing facilities are often provided by government, possibly in partnership with industry. And indeed, partnerships are critical to the whole story, as one of the speakers emphasized early on. And there was a fascinating presentation on partnerships between institutional investors and multilateral development banks, because institutional investors have, as I said, vast sums of capital in their portfolios, and very little of that is going to support infrastructure development, to support greenfield investments in developing countries. But multilateral development banks are a conduit through which much of that financing goes, but there's been very little success so far in getting those multilateral development banks to tap into institutional investment, and similarly getting the institutional investors to risk their capital in multilateral development banks. And so a partnership between these to work out some of the risk factors and mitigate them could open up vast sums of capital, which are needed, as we know, to achieve the SDGs, going from billions to trillions. As the speaker said, we're not going to achieve the SDGs. We're not going to get the trillions without tapping into institutional investors' pools of capital. So I've already spoken a bit about one of the industries we looked at, the materials, building materials industry. We also had a rich discussion of agriculture and agricultural industries, and some very interesting examples of innovations in low-income countries where the government of a Southeast Asian country has decided to commit to a framework of sustainable agriculture and to improve its innovation, its extension services to support the increased quality of agricultural commodity production in the country, to differentiate its products from its neighbors, to use geographic indexing to acquire a premium in international markets associated with quality and uniqueness of the product, and so on. And agro-processing, agro-industry has been an important part of the story of industrialization in many parts of the world, early on in the industrialization process. And since much of the developing world remains predominantly agricultural, it's certainly an important starting point for looking at how to move into greater value addition, both within the agricultural sector itself and through further processing of agricultural commodities. And finally, we've come to the circular economy discussions today, which is kind of taking the idea of value addition to its logical conclusion, which is to say, not assuming that when a product has reached the end of its quote unquote useful life, it has no value other than to go into a landfill or an incinerator, but looking at how that value can be sustained and recycled in effect and revalued through reintegrating into production in one form or another, reuse in one form or another. So I think I've covered pretty much the whole waterfront, with the exception of the rich discussion of the free trade area in Africa and how it can benefit industrialization, diversification of the economies of the region. So I'll read actually this last paragraph, which I think was crafted by my colleague, just to round off. The deep and fascinating presentations made to the 2020-2021 Sustainable Development Transformation Forum provided inspiration for policymakers and implementers to adopt evidence-based pathways toward low-carbon, green, and adaptive industrialization. While many challenges are clearly visible and hurdles will need to be overcome, the forum shed several rays of light on ways forward into a more sustainable and rational industrial future. Okay, I'll leave it there. Thanks.
Thank you, David. Before I hand over to Ambassador Faber, I just want to tell participants and panelists that you will be getting a report. Here is the draft, produced by an army of bureaucrats working overnight. No, actually, that's a joke. I did that myself. We'll be revising that, and that will be available. All the videos will also be available eventually. There will not be a verbatim report. Instead, you will be doing this report I just showed you, but you can check out all the videos online, and we'll be sending you the link as soon as that's available. I would like, because this is the end for me, I would like to thank everybody for your participation and all the speakers who were absolutely incredible and wonderful throughout this week, especially those who got up at 2 o'clock in the morning. I hope to see you all at the next forum. And with that, I will hand over to my colleague, Jean, who will produce, who will close the forum on behalf of UNOSD, followed by Ambassador Faber. Sorry, the other way around. Ambassador Faber will speak first, followed by Jean d'Aragon, and they will close out the forum. Thank you very much to everybody. Ambassador Faber, the floor is yours.
Hello and good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I'm of course very honored to speak on behalf of these few words to you on behalf of ASEF. We have been a proud and long-term partner of the SDTF, and of course also this year's theme, building better and greener and sustainable low-carbon industrialization, could not be timelier in the context of the pandemic. I'd like to be always optimistic, and in that sense, I agree also with the communique, the Incheon communique, which makes it a point of seeing this difficult crisis also as an opportunity. And I think the low carbonization will, of course, also address, like it has been said, the climate change. And now, especially in these times where companies, countries, and even continents give themselves objectives of not only reduce carbon emissions, but even become carbon neutral in the not so far future. Let's hope it will happen. But it took us a long time to get there, especially if you think that more than half a century ago, namely the Club of Rome already warned us that we could not be going on like we were, and that natural resources are limited and we have to take account of that. So I'm of course not an advocate of zero growth, but zero waste is certainly another story, and we should not give up on that. I think the discussions, of course, of today were very encouraging and also enlightening, especially for people like me who are not experts in the area. I think the investing in circular economy, the RRR, as has been explained, are certainly ways that we have to explore and that we have to commit to, and hopefully they will become mainstream over time. Unfortunately, I did not have the time to listen to everything of the forum, but I had the chance to hear, and David made these comments on the scarcity, on the non-scarcity of funds. I think that is really true, and we know that, but we need to indeed to develop these public-private partnerships, so that we can channel the funds where they are mostly needed. And hopefully, of course, like many people say, in that regard, and I haven't heard anything on that also neither today, is the risk of growing inequalities. I think that is something that we need to be aware of, and often, especially private capital, of course, looks for benefits, but does not necessarily like the risk. So that is something that I think that we also need to take into account. But on the other side, let me assure you that ASEF will continue to contribute to this development, to these discussions. We are an intergovernmental organization of 50 countries from Asia and Europe, and together with the European Union and the ASEAN Secretariat. And our mission is to promote better mutual understanding between Asia and Europe through intellectual, cultural, and people-to-people exchanges. So we bring together governments and civil society, and issues like those that have been discussed today are certainly high on our agenda. And you have heard Gina speaking with a lot of enthusiasm. And I hope that this reflects and this represents what ASEF is. So let me close here and thank everyone, those who have contributed to this event, the many panelists and the participants who are on the front line, but of course also those who are behind the scenes and make events like these happen. So in this regard, my particular thanks go, of course, to UNOSD, the office team. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much. I will thank you, Ambassador Faber. Actually, thank you very much for your kind words. And to you, Ambassador Faber, and distinguished guests, panelists, colleagues, and participants, ladies and gentlemen. Today we have come to the end of our remarkable journey together in the Sustainable Development Transformation Forum, the 6th edition. This year's SDTF, as the former participants and those familiar with the forum know it and often refer to it, had a particular focus placed on building back better and greener, sustainable low-carbon industrialization. Despite the restraints of and the hazard of the COVID-19 pandemic, we have managed to produce a very successful event. Those who are familiar with the SDTF also know that addressing this theme under the SDG 9 made us slightly move out of our comfort zone, and I'm very glad we did so. It was indeed a premiere for us, for the forum to address only one SDG, only one theme, and particularly this theme this year of SDG 9. However, some of the speakers and participants, as they told us, this was very timely, and I think Ambassador Fraser, you also mentioned that. Through the excellent presentations and panel discussions during the whole week, the forum succeeded to bring to light ideas and experiences of low-carbon transition across the economy, with a strong emphasis on decarbonization of the industrial sector, particularly in developing countries. What is interesting is that in many of these ideas and experiences can also be implemented to help build back better and greener, or if you prefer, for a sustainable recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic. As the Assistant Secretary General for Economic Development and Chief Economist Elliot Harris emphasizes during the first segment of the first session, the endeavor to support countries to build back better and greener means to ensure that they are on a sustainable and inclusive development path to shared prosperity. He also noted that many low and lower middle income countries will need support for their structural transformation towards more productive activities and sectors, while also contributing to tackling global challenges like climate change, biodiversity loss, and the degradation of the world's ocean. It was mentioned a few times, and particularly by Ms. Fatima Denton, Director of the UNU Institute for Natural Resources in Africa, that some developed countries who are greening their industries at home are sometimes transferring their old polluting, energy-intensive technologies to developing countries. Of course, some may say that we could have talked more about the importance of leaving no one behind. And I think that was what the Ambassador Faber talked a little bit also. Yes, we could have done probably this in our efforts for sustainable low carbon industrialization. In that sense, I appreciate very much the idea that Mrs. Denton also put forward, as she called us, to take the informal sector with us in this process of green and sustainable industrialization. We all know that the informal sector is a major contributor to the economy, and especially in times of crisis, where the informal sector is particularly innovative. Throughout the week, we'll also learn about innovations in various parts and scales of the industrialization, including housing, agriculture, and even innovative ways of promoting and supporting such innovations at the household, city, country, and region levels, and up to the official development assistance, or DA, foreign direct investment, FDI, diaspora investments, and other forms of investments from within the countries and from abroad. And today we have heard about moving to zero waste circular economies, which some speakers had also slightly touched upon during other sessions, particularly yesterday's. Of course, we could not, in a so short period of time, examine deeply all the sub-themes of sustainable, low-carbon industrialization. For that reason, we need to continue our conversation, and this will occur through the next activity, at least, for instance, of the SDTF, which we would like to convene in person in Incheon City when the situation allows. As well, as some of you know, we're also already working on the publications where the presenters and speakers of this Sustainable Development Transformation Forum that took place in virtual form this week will be invited to develop and share further their ideas in the forms of articles to be integrated in the 2020-21 SDTF publication. We produced such a publication last year, and I invite you to look for it on our UNOSD website. The next one, based on this week, SDTF, will be online on our website again in the next couple of months. Before closing, I would like to thank again all the presenters and the panelists who generously gave their time and share their ideas, knowledge, and experience on the themes explored. I would like to thank Mr. David O'Connor and Mr. Comfoy, the two invited conveners of this SDTF, and who acted as in turns as moderators and rapporteurs. The forum would not have mastered the technology, keep in touch with the presenters and participants, and supplied us with a constant stream of information and support. On behalf of the United Nations Office for Sustainable Development, I would like also to thank our longtime partner in the Sustainable Development Transformation Forum, the Asia Europe Foundation. And finally, I would like to thank you, the participants who followed us over the week. I look forward to meeting you during our next SDTF activity. I hope to hold in person. We hope to hold it in person when the situation gets better. Meanwhile, please stay safe and healthy. Keep courage and hope. We'll get out of this together very soon. Thank you very much. This is the end of this week long presentation, week-long SDTF, and then we thank you very much again, and then see you soon.
Ciao. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye, everybody. Thank you so much to the presenters, moderator, John, and also to the participants. Great to have you all. Bye.